Thanks for your time, Taylor. So, Matt Sluka, just after midnight, or I think 11:26 his time on the Mountain Time, announces he's going to redshirt and look for an option. What were your thoughts when you heard about this story when you woke up this morning?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest thing, there's just no winner in this. I think everyone looks bad in this. UNLV, the administration, the coaching staff, the Sluka and his agent. I think the biggest thing from the player's perspective is make sure that you've got something in writing. And I think that's probably a life lesson in general. But having a verbal commitment, and it looks like there's been a different player from UNLV from the running back spot that I saw just a minute ago has also announced that he's leaving. This is a theme that I think we hear a lot in the portal these days, and coaches love to say this about, hey, we had this guy get promised X amount of money. Colorado State was in the headlines for this with their quarterback and their star receiver and what was promised. And a lot of this stuff gets thrown around by boosters, by NIL collectives, by coaches that are trying to go around the system to recruit kids. And there are rumors that are out there that this isn't the only time that this has happened. This is the first time, though, that somebody has decided to use their red shirt and backed out of a season because of something that wasn't met. And I just go back to how sloppy this looks and that there's no real winner here. This is a mess. And I'm hoping the only good news in all of this is you hope that we are close to getting some actual regulation around what's going on in the portal, because the NIL world that we live in now, I don't think this was ever the intention. And the NCAA just being afraid to get sued into oblivion and not having any sort of institutional control has led to, it's just a mess that we're in right now.
Taylor, agents and all this involved, there's really no end in sight for this because the House settlement might wind up going to trial now. There's all this kind of a mess. Do you just kind of think it has to be maybe a grassroots effort by everybody involved to deal with these problems until there's some sort of rule and governing body that makes any kind of sense in the world?
You would hope so, but I also go back to there is an issue even once you arrive at, let's say you reach an agreement where the schools and these players, they enter into contracts themselves instead of right now where players are entering into contracts with an NIL collective that's separate from the university. If players become employees and they are under contract with a university and there's a rev share model or there's some sort of direct compensation from the school, all of a sudden now you're introducing you have budget issues and constraints on the scholarships that, and a big part of this is tied with Title IX. What happens to your non-revenue sports and specifically your women's athletics? That right now this is solved because NIL collectives, it's all private money. It's not handled by the school. That's a huge reason why these schools are trying to deflect and keep this away from the schools, because at the very top of the college football food chain, some of these programs can afford to pay their star players and even their backups in football and basketball. But most programs, once you get to the bottom of the P4 and effectively all of the group of 5 schools, they cannot afford to pay their roster and include scholarships and also the scholarship limits, which, oh, by the way, are getting increased for all of their non-revenue sports. So there's no institutional control right now. It seems it's a complete free-for-all in the portal world. I know the coaching staffs they hate it because they're having to re-recruit their own kids as well. And I don't think this is the only time that we'll see this. I think this is the first, the last few years, there's been a lot of firsts. And I think this whole Sluka and UNLV debacle, it's probably not the only time we'll see that this season, where promises will not have been met and kept, and guys will either forfeit mid-season or they'll sit out bowl games and conference championships like we saw a couple years ago with Central Florida.
And then Michael Allen, the running back, said that expectations for opportunities, unfortunately, were not met. I'm excited to continue my football career. I'm not sure if that means expectations for opportunities. He didn't enough carries, so he's not getting enough money. But, and again, this could be just break out into a lot. What about Barry Odom and UNLV? And they have this really nice start going, and right now would be perhaps the group of 5 or whatever you want to call it, conference representative in the college football playoff, and then maybe they're going to be just fine and guys step up and get better. What about all of a sudden this week when you have the conference realignment story, you have the distractions in front of his program?
Well, I just go back to, again, it's a mess for the school. And I guarantee you UNLV is not thrilled that they are being sort of dragged through the mud, so to speak, and they're on all sorts of headlines for something that is really a stain on their reputation. And there's from the details that we have so far, there's no contract that was in place. There was nothing that was signed. So I don't foresee this going to court. I don't see any sort of world where this goes beyond just the headlines that we've seen so far. But it's a mess right now. I mean, that's the piece that it's just embarrassing for more than anything else. Coach Odom and that staff. Now, the other thing that I think is interesting for UNLV is if they felt like Sluka gave them the best opportunity to win the Mountain West and get to a playoff spot, the amount of money that's on the line for that, they would have figured out a way to raise that money and keep him there. So I do think it's interesting that they effectively, I'm sure very recently, they were aware that he was considering walking and that he was coming up on the end of the amount of games that he could play to keep his red shirt. So I think it's obvious that UNLV just decided internally, we're winning our games. You're completing less than 50% of your passes. From a QBR standpoint, he's one of the worst in the Mountain West. A dynamic player, he's a good athlete, but I think they're saying, we think we could still win the Mountain West and have a really special season, and we don't necessarily need you to do it.
Yeah, and then there have been players that have already tweeted out, I bet so-and-so throws for 150 and has 3 touchdowns or whatever. So there are players taking their side within the program. Now, Saturday night, late night, thought you were tucked into bed because you're a good kid. And yet the Colorado-Baylor ending in regulation with Shedeur hitting Wester, and you jump out of your Twitter jungle. And your thoughts about how Baylor, and there was an explanation from Dave Aranda, but your thoughts about that Hail Mary and the setup by the defense.
I texted you guys. I couldn't believe it. I was sitting there watching the game, and there's a number of opportunities where Baylor closes out that game. The credit to Colorado for staying in the fight. They had to make the plays when they were there. My issue, though, was there shouldn't have even been that opportunity. And the biggest thing, and it's what I was texting you guys about, I tweeted it, I've never seen a Hail Mary situation handled that poorly, where you have a timeout. You come to the sideline. The entire purpose of that discussion and that timeout is to make sure that you communicate who the backline defenders are in the end zone and to swat the ball down. Don't try to be a hero and get an interception. Those are the coaching points every single time. I didn't even play defense, and I know that those are the coaching points on the defensive side of the ball. And then you line back up, and they decide to bring pressure, and they're pressing on the outside. And if there's one thing that we know from Colorado, there's a lot of things they don't do particularly well, but their skill players on the outside are some of the best in the Big 12. LeJontay Wester is an unbelievable receiver. He starts almost everywhere in the country at receiver. Doesn't matter whether he's at Colorado or not. And you've got him pressed up on the outside, and safety help doesn't get there. We've all seen the play, and I know your audience knows this better than anybody. Just it's a calamity. I've never seen a Hail Mary handled that poorly. And now for Baylor, that's one of those losses that, for all the issues that they've had, and this was a long off season for them, that's the kind of game where a win propels you forward. You feel really good about going into the rest of the season and going into conference play the rest of the way. But that loss, now the challenge is pick yourself up off the mat, and how do you make sure that this doesn't snowball?
Yeah, I think that's the question. That's what we're waiting to see on Saturday, because I feel like they are good enough in this Big 12 where anybody can beat anybody, except for maybe Utah can beat everybody. It's all about how they respond this weekend against a very good BYU team. Taylor, your thoughts on what happened with the Oklahoma Sooners against Tennessee? Not so much the loss as the quarterback situation. Jackson Arnold clearly has not performed well up until this point, Michael Hawkins comes in and seems to give them a little bit of life. I know Joel Klatt had like a whole breakdown on like how this isn't really Jackson Arnold's fault. This is the play calling and Seth Luttrell and all of that, the blocking schemes. What do you see and what did you think about Michael Hawkins coming in and now being named the starter, at least for this week and moving forward?
Yeah, I think you're looking for a spark, right? I mean, bringing in Hawkins at that point in the game, Jackson Arnold, there were a couple opportunities. One of them wasn't his fault. It was a fumble. But the opportunities that they had that their defense created where it got them short fields and it looked like Oklahoma was going to be able to get back in the game. And Jackson Arnold and the offense gives it right back. And Jackson Arnold, to me, has looked a little bit overwhelmed through the first part of the season. But I also think, and we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, it goes beyond Jackson Arnold from a procedure standpoint and just the operation of the offense. They have not looked clean all season. You've got guys running into one another. You've got offensive linemen going in the wrong direction. There was the clip a couple of weeks ago where the left side of the offensive line is in slide protection, and you've got one guy releasing as though it's a screenplay. Just miscommunication all over the place on offense. And I thought that the change late in the game to Hawkins was you're trying to create some sort of spark. It's obviously not working with Jackson Arnold. And I thought that score is a little bit misleading because it felt like if Tennessee had kept their foot on the gas, that ends up being a 4-score win, maybe worse. And there's some garbage time points that score looks a little bit closer than it really was. But it was also, I just came away really impressed with the physicality from Tennessee and that defensive line. I think for a long time, Vols fans have this is the kind of team that they've been hoping for. That roster is starting to look more. They're not there yet, I don't think, but it's close. They're very. They look very similar to what a Georgia and an Alabama type roster looks like from the top down, and especially in the trenches.
Taylor, what were your thoughts on Hugh Freeze throwing his quarterbacks under the bus after the game last week?
Yeah, I hated it. I mean, it was those are the kind of things that lose the locker room. And there's always a way to communicate. The point that he was making on we have guys open, we need to take care of the football. There is a way as a head coach to deliver that is saying exactly that. Hey, the opportunities are there. I believe in these guys. We just have to clean up turnovers. And when the opportunities are there to be made, our guys know that we have to step up and make that happen. But the way that he went about it was, it's not my fault. I don't have to do anything different. It's not the coach's issue. It's these guys that we have right now just aren't stepping up and doing their job. There is no faster way to lose a locker room. And in this day and age also, this is not the 1990s where you can publicly challenge your guys and they're not going anywhere. If you go after a guy that is there basically because of NIL money and they don't feel like they're getting respected in the locker room by their own coaching staff, they're going to leave. And if you start losing your own guys because they don't have faith in the head coach, that is the fastest way in modern college football to get fired. And I also didn't like his comment about, if they play Arkansas another 9 times, they win every time. Mm-hmm. That was just the one time that they get got. I mean, that's a lot of arrogance because as you guys saw a couple weeks ago, that Arkansas team should have gone into Stillwater and beat Oklahoma State. It's a good football team. And now Auburn has embarrassing losses to Cal at home and to Arkansas. Everything that Hugh Freeze is putting out right now in terms of his press conferences and media, somebody needs to get a hold of him and say, let's reel this back in, go through some PR 101, because right now he's not building any momentum with his fan base.
Final thing from me for you, Taylor, the biggest game of the weekend. Any thoughts on Georgia and Alabama?
It's going to be a dogfight. I think Georgia's run through the rest of this conference slate is going to be really determined by, number one, this game, obviously, and then they've got the trip to Austin in a couple weeks after that. You really just want to be 1-1 through that stretch. 2-0, obviously, they've got the capability and the talent to do that, but those are both road tests. I think if you split those, if you're Georgia, that's the goal. But you just want to see also from Georgia, do they clean up some of the offensive issues that they had against Kentucky a couple of weeks ago where they never got anything going explosively? And for Alabama, I think they're going to try and turn this into a rock fight, try to dominate time of possession, run the football as best they can, utilize Jalen Milroe's legs. But just as a fan, I can't wait to watch this one. This is going to be a really good football game.
What do you have this week, Taylor?
Back with CBS, so we've got San Diego State and Central Michigan Saturday afternoon. So my first trip to Mount Pleasant, Michigan.
Well, enjoy it. Is the weather still like we went to Nebraska? Craig and I went to Nebraska Friday and then was there Saturday, and it was still very warm and muggy. What's it like getting up closer to the north in Michigan?
Yeah, I'm hoping for a cold front. We had Western Michigan a couple weeks ago, and it was still hot, but I think it's actually supposed to start to cool off a little bit. Highs in the low 70s, high 60s, start to feel a little more like football weather. But, I'm based in Austin, and you guys know in Waco we need ready for some better weather here. It's too stinking hot.
Yeah, I look forward to that, too. We were hoping to be a little bit cooler in Lincoln, but it was like 90 and muggy. And what an atmosphere. Have you ever been to Memorial Stadium?
I have not, but it is one that I would love to go to. And you talk about loyalty to that fan base. It's been a long time since that team really had much to be real excited about, and the sellout streak that they have looks like one of the best environments in college football.
I think that Raiola kid might have something to him, Taylor. I don't know. I'm no scout, but I think he might have something. But in all seriousness, I think Luke Altmaier's been a great story that kind of flies under the radar a little bit as well. But yeah, you should definitely get your way up there because it's a one of a kind experience.
Yeah, I'm with you on Luke Altmaier. I think Illinois is one of the best stories of the season, and that's not a fluke. That's a good football team, and I think they are. The line against Penn State doesn't make any sense to me, but I also don't know what I'm talking about.
Hey, I have one more quarterback question. Have you watched, and I know it's early, and it's a franchise that has ruined quarterbacks, but have you seen what Jaden Daniels is doing early on with Washington?
I watched the Monday night game, and the throw that he hit late to Terry McLaurin from a rookie, from any quarterback, from a rookie to stand in, he knows he's going to get hit in the face and just drops a perfect ball in the end zone to seal that game. Man, those are the things, and those are the reasons why we're seeing so many rookie quarterbacks play now, because you look at what's happening in Houston and what's going on now with Washington, and you have rookie quarterbacks that they step in, and all of a sudden, it's like, man, that guy looks like he's been playing for 2 or 3 years, and it doesn't always work that way. Look at what's happening in Carolina with Bryce Young, and I know it's a totally different situation, but the way the cap works now and the new collective bargaining agreement, they're going to throw rookies in straight away, and if you catch lightning in a bottle with like a C.J. Stroud, then there's your guy. But man, with just very different than the model that it used to be, where you sit a guy for the first couple of years. That's not always needed anymore.
Yeah. Taylor, thank you, man. Have a great broadcast in Michigan. Taylor McHargue with us of CBS and ESPN, former Rice quarterback. Love his takes with us, opinions, and more. He jumped out of the text room with us on Saturday night following that 40-yard bullet from Shedeur to Wester, and what a throw. By the way, Michael Allen, the running back at UNLV, my decision has no ties to NIL agreements. This is due to on-field opportunities. I did not receive a dime from any UNLV collective.
Yeah, he has like 200 yards rushing in the season. So this is what I was saying earlier. This is just odd timing, but it's the timing you're going to get when we're 4 games in. This is when you typically start to see guys making their decisions on whether they're going to redshirt and what they might do in terms of their big picture future, like a Matthew Sluka is not only, hey, I'm sitting out, but I'm going to also be in the portal here pretty soon. So, I mean, that's to be expected somewhat, and I don't think that's any correlation at all. So glad he cleared that up for anybody trying to connect that.
Yeah, no, that's good. Kevin Sweeney made this again. Never got any signed documentation for his client. We're talking about Cromartie for Sluka. Didn't reach out to the collective at UNLV until late August. Wasn't a registered agent in the state the client he represents plays in, which is a misdemeanor. If you do a deal and you're not registered within the state, even though there's a federal law about agents, that was passed after this here with Sluka entering and enrolling at UNLV.
There was also some of the language that UNLV was trying to dance around in terms of like making sure they didn't violate anything, and that's what prohibited them, even though we know like full well everybody's blowing past these, they all got their little loopholes and whatnot, but like it sounds like UNLV was trying to say, well, we abided by the letter of the law and did everything we were supposed to, and that's like some of their defense. But yeah, I just go back to pointing the finger at everybody. Like, I don't know how I guess you just thought you landed a sweetheart of a deal of like, Matthew Sluka's coming. Like, we didn't guarantee him anything. We'll give him a little bit of money, like $3,000 that'll maybe pay rent. But other than that, like, he's just going to come in and be our starting quarterback. I guess that's what they thought. And then on the other side, hey, we got nothing in writing and nothing actually signed, but we should just be expecting big chunks of payments from UNLV moving forward. It's a drop ball on all sides, and a program that needs to, I guess, probably revisit their NIL a little bit, and also a warning to players out there and their families of get some actual real representation that knows what they're doing.